like you, Rita,
Wow, an efficient conference interpreter is one who is first of all trained, meaning who has gone to school to learn what it means to interpret from one language to another or to translate from one language to another. An efficient conference interpreter is also one who speaks more than one language and, of course, is confident in their abilities to convey a message from one language to another. So simply put, an efficient conference interpreter needs to know 2 languages minimum and also needs to make an effort to go to school to get training in that profession. Thank you.
What do you think makes you a good interpreter, Rita?
That's not for me to say whether I'm a good interpreter or not. It's for others, it's for the listeners, it's for the colleagues to ascertain whether or not I'm a good conference interpreter. But then, I'm guessing what you mean is the qualities of a good conference interpreter.
Exactly.
The first will be one who is punctual. When a conference is supposed to start at a specific time, it's common knowledge that you, the interpreter, is supposed to be there at least 30 minutes before to make sure that together with the technician, you do a sound check. You check to make sure that everything that you will need to work with is available, is handy. That includes even drinking water and, snacks and anything that you might need. And then an efficient conference interpreter is one who never stops reading. We learn every day, and we stop learning on the day that we die. But I dare say that even on the day that you die, you learn how to die because you've not died before. So, a conference interpreter is one who is curious, who is always checking to be sure that what's happening on the news, whether it's in finance, in business, in weather, in politics, in health, in fact, law. And a good interpreter is somebody who is versatile, who has the vocabulary that is required, who is a wordsmith enough to craft meaning in every sector of life. And so, in effect, we should be able to learn at all times. And then lastly, a good interpreter should be one who is conscious of what's happening in their environment. By that I mean, information can come even from that local vendor. Information can come even from that child who is around you. So you should be open enough, receptive enough to understand what's happening in your environment. Thank you.
All right, we have some 3 phrases coming straight up from our listener. Her name is Zota. Hi, Zota. Thanks for joining us. She wants to have an efficient interpretation of those phrases. We'll begin with number 1.
Okay.
Well, these days cost an arm and a leg. How would you translate that in French? Well, these days cost an arm and a leg.
Le prix du carburant ces derniers temps est vraiment coûteux.
This is awesome. I hope that Zota, you picked that. Le prix du carburant ce temps est vraiment coûteux. That's interesting. You got it. And then the second one, an interpreter is a person whose job is to translate what someone is saying into another language.
Before I translate that, I'll have to correct that. An interpreter doesn't translate. An interpreter interprets. So the sentence should read, an interpreter is one whose job is to interpret what someone is saying from one language into another language. So the translation will be like this, or the interpretation will be like this. Un interprète, c'est quelqu'un qui a pour métier d'interpréter le message d'une langue à une autre langue.
Can you say that again?
Un interprète, c'est quelqu'un qui a pour métier d'interpréter le message d'une langue, d'une autre langue.
Zota should be taking notes wherever she is. And the last phrase, yeah, that's it. It's action woman, and you're a woman in action. You know, many people see you traveling and they envy you traveling, but they don't understand that it takes a lot of work from a mental perspective and even physical. So the next phrase is: le vivre ensemble est un facteur capital pour promouvoir l'unité nationale.
Wow, I like that one.
I love it too.
Well, simply put, I would say cohabiting is a key factor in the promotion of national unity.
Cohabiting is a key factor in
promotion of national unity.
Of national unity. That's awesome. You know, we'll be celebrating this year's edition of National Day under the theme Army and Nation Together for Prosperous and United Cameroon. There's so many things the Army is doing. There's so many things the government is doing. There's so many things the citizens are doing and must continue to do if they want one and indivisible Cameroon. Am I correct?
That's 100% correct.
Thank you, Rita. We are some 12 minutes into the program. I'd like to find out from you if you'd like to establish a personal relationship with someone you translate for or maintain a more professional and formal relationship.
Familiarity breeds contempt, so it's always good to keep the relationship at a professional level.
What are the challenges you confront daily while interpreting messages, spoken words from one language pedestal into another?
Sometimes you have some very unfriendly speakers. By unfriendly, I mean their speed is on another level. Sometimes they speak as fast as they think, and so it makes it difficult for you to process what they are saying and, deliver it in the target language. Some other times you meet some speakers who themselves are unsure, confused, and not well structured in their speech. And so it makes it a little bit complex for you as an interpreter. And then on some other days, you have some speakers themselves who are bilingual, meaning they speak more than one language. And so in a speech that is supposed to be, say for instance in English, you find the speaker switching or shuttling between English and French. I was going to say Swedish. Between English and French simultaneously. So sometimes it's difficult to know from what language to what language you are supposed to interpret. Those are some of the challenges most or all interpreters face on a daily basis.
Wow. Let's say Target Peace is organizing a special come together on the last Sunday in the month of May, bringing mothers from all 10 regions in Cameroon, plus some of your family members to share quality moments. And at some point in time, there was some conferencing. How would you introduce yourself as a conference interpreter?
Well, a conference interpreter might not necessarily need to introduce themselves, except the need arises. Because most times, a conference interpreter will just be in the booth, interpreting what is said by the audience or by the speaker. So, on a good day, I will not have to introduce myself as a conference interpreter, except maybe when we are working in the case of consecutive interpretation, where the audience is restrained, and of course you have to tell the people that I standing here am going to be doing the job of a conference interpreter. And so it depends on the context and the mitigating circumstances that will warrant or not warrant an introduction.
And because of your work, I don't know, when you go to church sometimes, you travel places, I'm sure you've been to Ghana, you've been to Nigeria and other places where there's a time when the pastor is sending out a message and the other person that has to translate it into another language denatures the message. When that happens in front of you, what's your first reaction?
Like every interpreter, I giggle. I am conscious that there's something wrong with the message.
Do you at the end of service like call the interpreters, you call him to caution so that he or she can do better?
Well, that depends on what took me to church. If I went to church as a Christian, then I might not do that. But if I went to church as a community interpreter, because then it's no longer conference interpretation, if I went as a community interpreter and the person looks friendly, I might make such an attempt.
When you stress on friendliness,
Friendly.
I think the word has become so cold and we really have very few friendly people. Well, with discussions like this, I think those listening understand the essence of being friendly 24/7.
That's
because
true.
You don't want to come and make another mistake tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the next day, just because you were unfriendly and someone willing to run away from your very unfriendly attitudes.
That's true.
Let's have this one from Leila Kiga. Leila Kiga says, "Hi Leila, thanks for joining us." She says, "My biggest problem I see with interpreters is the word-for-word translation. I don't know if you have that knack to of sentences instead of interpretation of what was said in the second language. Like you just corrected the second phrase that Zota sends to us. An interpreter is a person whose job is to translate what someone is saying into another language. And it's like, oh, no. It should rather be an interpreter is a person whose job is to interpret what someone is saying from one language into another language. So you are very cautious. But Leila is not happy with the job of some of the interpreters. She says, I may be wrong, but I think interpretation is more about communicating the context and sense of what is being said and not necessarily translating words from one language to another.
And that's what I agree with her, because that's what brings the difference between a trained interpreter and one who just speaks more than one language. One who just speaks more than one language will definitely be doing what Google Translate does, word for word, even if it's not right in that specific context. But one who is trained will think out of the box, will look at the environment and understand the message in perspective, and then do a good delivery.
Wow. So people need to be trained, they need to be humble enough to accept that they need some polishing.
That's
in
right.
order to call themselves qualitative professional interpreters. They're not just trying to wear your pair of shoes when they still have a long way to go. Maybe I would like to find out if you have a syndicate. If yes, what is the syndicate doing about those horrible government banners every day with unbelievable translation of text from French to English or vice versa?
I will say that there is a syndicate. Most of the graduates from the Advanced School of Translators and Interpreters, this not to do publicity, but that's where I was trained, and so it's my alma mater. Yes, they have a syndicate, and I believe they are doing their utmost to correct some of those mistakes when they come up, and also to sensitize the people, make them understand that word-for-word translation isn't really the best we can do. And so if you contact us for the translations and the interpretations, you will get the best. I believe principally they are raising awareness and also trying to correct some of the mistakes that already exist.
Okay. Thank you so much, Leila, for your questions. I hope they were quite clarified by my guest. We have Tilarius Atia joining us. Hi, Tilarius. Thanks for joining us. He would like to know from you the difference between translation and interpretation.
Wow, I was waiting for that question to be the first.
It's come 20 minutes into the program.
It came all the same, and that's a good one.
Better late than never, they say.
Yes, you are so correct. Translation is conveying a message from one language to another in writing, while interpretation is conveying a message from one language to another verbally. That's the difference.
Beautiful. And I'd like to know from you the role of translation and the role of interpretation.
If translation is doing the job in the written form and interpretation is doing the job verbally, it means the role of translation is to get the documentation from one language to another written. So maybe newspapers, laws, decrees, all the things that go under the umbrella of writing. Translation's role is to make sure that everybody can read it in the language that they are comfortable in. Interpretation's role, of course, will be to make sure that all that is spoken during that conference, during that meeting, during that assembly in one language is gotten simultaneously in the other language verbally by the people who are attending. So somebody should be able to listen to the message in the language that they are comfortable with. So interpretation makes that possible.
When you know better, you do better. Maya Angelou said that, and we can feel that in your words. The last question from Hilarious this morning is to find out from you how translation and interpretation can help right the wrongs of translations we have here and there daily.
We go back to what the syndicate or the trade union or the association is doing. First, start by correcting that which is wrong and raising awareness that these things can be done better if we get professionals to do the job. It's like saying, if I have an event and I contact an event planner for the services, the catering services and decor and all that, I can be sure that I will get a good event. But then if I have an event and I just assume that, okay, I know one or two things about event planning, the results might not be completely bad, but they will not be completely good. So, getting a professional hand to do the translation and the interpretation will reduce, if not stamp out, some of the common mistakes that we are observing in our community. Thank you.
Out of our interpretation talk, for 2 minutes, we will take you out of the box to find out from you if you had to choose between money and an interpretation conference. What would you go for and why?
That's a tricky bit because all of them boil down to the same destination. But then I'll choose the interpretation because in interpretation, you communicate. In communicating, you build bridges, not dams. You fix relationships. You ensure that people are comfortable in their skin. You ensure that people understand what's being said or written. You make sure that people are able to express themselves in the language that they are best, feel comfortable in. And so I'll go for interpretation because in it, there is communication, there is reconciliation, there is relationship, and there is building the bridges that we spoke about earlier.
Wow, this is so nice to hear. If you were food, what would you be and why?
If I were
food, like FOOD.
Okay. If I were food, what food will I choose? Hey, that's a subtle way of asking me what my favorite food is. That's hard to say. That's hard to say. Well. Okay, for now, because it's like my favorite food changes per season. But for now, I guess I will be shuttling between achu with the yellow soup and fufu and eru. those two for
That
now.
means you are a broom, rushing out obstacles and difficulties preventing the people from being one. Because actually it's like a finger going around the world.
Yes.
And it's an integral part of the culture in the grassroots, probably
Yes.
eating in the Northwest and the West regions and adopted in all 10 regions of Cameroon. I could call it one of those elite cases that attacked a national unity.
In fact, one of those unifying meals. It was on purpose that I chose Achu and Eru.
You did well. You did well. You were in an examination. You'll be given, let's say, 15 on 10.
Oh, that's beautiful
Not
to
10
hear.
on 15, 15 on 10. And so if you were vegetable, what would you be? Vegetable.
That's Eru. Because
Mm.
if you look at the nutritive value and all the things that are attached to Eru, that's what keeps our international visitors coming back for more. But then, with the vegetable bits, I would like to add that we could also have ndole in that category and cocoyam leaves as well. Because though cocoyam leaves are not much talked about, they have a very high nutritious value as well. Hopefully, someday more and more people will get to discover that part of cocoyam leaves.
Wow, this is smart. So, beautiful talk taking us to 11:30 without me realizing. So we've come to the end of the show, and I'd like you to channel a very powerful message to Cameroonians who will be celebrating the National Day in 13 days. No, 12 days, first.
Wow. It goes back to the last sentence I was supposed to interpret, talking about cohabiting being a primary factor or a key player in national unity. Cohabiting is not without its challenges. Cohabiting is not a walk in the park. Cohabiting is like a rose which has its flower that can be used for perfume, but also has its thorns that could wound you from time to time. But then, with the determination, with the willingness to cohabit with each other despite our weaknesses, our strengths, our abilities and capabilities, we might just be using the key that is available to unlock the door of national unity. So let's stay in cohabitation.
Thank you very much, Rita Ditone Sume, for being an efficient yardstick. Authorship emulates of quality. Some people aren't used to an environment where excellence is expected, but getting used to your excellence is one disease I want every Cameroonian to be infected with. Every great architect is necessarily a great poet. Like my guest today, ladies and gentlemen, learn to be a great original interpreter of your time, your day, and your age. You just might be able to write and speak 2 languages, but that doesn't mean that you can be an interpreter like my guest, Rita Ditone Sume. I invite you to follow on all her social media platforms, learn from her and grow. Solange Akam has been handling the machines and efficiently, because without her efficient touch, we would not have had those very beautiful and wise words from Rita. Marcelo Casibile is in charge of programs, and Oliver Kindemoli is the regional station manager. I am Amy Banda, the anchor, thanking you for being an army with the use of your efficient languages in Cameroon, English and French, in promoting social cohesion and national unity. A very happy National Day in advance to you all. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Station, the mother of all radios in Cameroon.